And now we have, I will say fairly short presentation. What the commissioners are going to do now is talk to you about what we did, what we heard, and what we changed, which will give you a good idea of what is in that new Constitution. And then, from then on, we want to open it up for discussion. Questions, discussion from you. So I'm going to, Brian, I think I'm doing what we did?
Yeah.
Or are you? So I want to talk about what we did. We had 19 community gatherings that covered all 6 current M&A regions. We had 28 written submissions. We had 5 hearings with M&A citizens, locals, and affiliates. We received more than 1,000 pages of transcripts, notes, and written submissions. We considered more than 300 specific suggestions or recommendations. Now we want to share what we heard, what we changed, and we will follow the themes of the What We Heard report. So I am going to turn it over to Brian to begin What We Heard 1. Brian?
Okay. So what I want to talk to you about then is what we heard on 1. So the first issue, our Constitution, first issues. Our Constitution should protect our history and culture, as well as our citizens inside and outside the province. So the Commission received numerous calls to better protect our history and culture in our Constitution and our new government. Participants also expressed concerns about protecting and supporting our citizens, including those citizens living in other provinces whether they had left Alberta for work, school, or family reasons. That was loud and clear. So what we changed? What we did is we decided to protect historical artifacts, to protect culture and knowledge, also include public safety and justice, as well as collaborate with other Métis governments. So the Commission made several changes to the Constitution to better protect our culture and citizens, including we added the repatriation and protection of cultural artifacts in Section 13(2)(b), and the protection and promotion of traditional and cultural knowledge in Section 13(2)(c) to roles and responsibilities. We also added the promotion of public safety and justice in Section 13(2)(j) to the roles and responsibilities of the government. Finally, there are important challenges to ensuring that our citizens have access to programs and services if they temporarily relocate for school or work, including the MGRSA. That's the agreement. Prohibits Métis people from belonging to more than one federally recognized Métis government. To ensure these issues remain a priority for future governments, Section 13(2)(n) of the Constitution directs the Otipemisiwak Métis government to collaborate with other Métis governments to coordinate delivery or programs and services to citizens, to close the gaps faced by our citizens who move to other provinces and cannot access Métis services. I guess it's your turn, Casey.
Good afternoon, everyone. What we heard too, our boundaries should reflect the histories, aspirations, and realities of our communities. The Commission received many suggested changes to the districts and district boundaries, including 10 maps submitted by M&A citizens. For those of you that were at any of the engagements, you'll recall that we asked for people, if you had suggested changes, that you could draw on that map and submit the maps. So we did receive 10 submissions of maps. The suggestions ranged from requests to redraw lines between districts to better reflect the patterns of movement and occupancy to request for new districts to be added. What we changed. revisions to boundaries for several districts. The number of our districts increased from 19 to 22, and the districts will be established by law. So I just want to remind people at this point that in the Constitution, you'll see at the back we have the two maps. The last Constitution had the territories maps, and we had a loose page for the districts. In this print, we have both maps. The one with the district is for engagement purposes only, because as I just mentioned, the district boundary lines will be covered by a law. So the Commission made several minor changes to boundaries within territories to reflect more accurately the connections between communities. So we did that in the Peace River Territory, the North Saskatchewan River Territory, and the Battle River Territory. The Commission also created several new districts. The districts of Calgary and Edmonton were divided into 2 districts each. This was done to provide additional representation for MNA citizens in our major urban centers without allowing urban areas to control the government, which was a concern expressed by many residents of rural areas. A new district was added for the community of Conklin within the Lower Athabasca Territory. A district for Conklin was supported by participants at every gathering in the Region 1 area and was consistent with the efforts of the Commission to ensure that communities with strong Métis histories and active locals would transfer into their own district under a new government. Several of the maps that we received were from the Region 1 area identifying Conklin. Several participants at gatherings in Region 6 requested that the Peace River Territory be given 5 districts and that all territories should have the same number of districts. The Commission was concerned, however, that doing this would create an even greater rural-urban imbalance and would significantly increase the size of the new government because each territory may have a citizen's representative but can also have a district council, all of which will need to be funded. Having an unnecessarily large and expensive government was a concern expressed by many of our citizens during our community gatherings. So again, I'll just mention that the map that's in there for district is a proposal and not part of the Constitution. Trav?
Thank you, Karen. So we also heard that the Constitution must protect our inherent rights. Citizens strongly supported our efforts to enshrine the rights of the nation in the Constitution through the Bill of Rights, which is the second part. In addition to our last draft, which harkened back to the 1870 Métis Bill of Rights proclaimed by Louis Riel's provincial government. In addition, several participants made important suggestions to expand the list of rights as well as strengthen the language used to define their scope in the Constitution. So I'd like to share a bit about what we changed in the Constitution to try to incorporate what we heard. The Commission added several new rights to Part 2, the Bill of Rights, and strengthened the language around some of the key existing rights, including the right to practice and ensure the continuation of spirituality of the Métis Nation within Alberta without harassment, discrimination, or persecution. So that was added in Section 6.1I. The right to the integrity of Métis families consistent with Métis cultural values, the best interests of Métis children, cultural community and self-determination in Section 6.1N. Several participants requested protections for Métis children, so the Commission decided to accept that and expand on that recommendation through that provision. Next, the right to access, control, possess, and own historical records, other information necessary to protect and promote the rights and interests of the Métis Nation within Alberta and its communities. That's Section 6.1J, and this was added in response to concerns about the difficulties that many Métis people and communities faced in accessing historical records, such as residential school records, and the importance of repatriating Métis historical records and artifacts to the control of the Métis governments, communities, and citizens. Also, many citizens expressed concerns about the current limitations on Métis harvesting rights, including the lack of acknowledgement of Métis harvesting rights in the South by the Government of Alberta, and the requirement that the MNA citizens trace their ancestry to Alberta prior to a particular date. While the Constitution cannot change the policies of Alberta, it can present the position of our new government in the strongest possible terms. To do this, Section 6.1E of the Constitution protects the right of all Métis Nation within Alberta citizens to harvest resources anywhere within the Métis Nation homeland and in a manner consistent with Métis customs, practices, and traditions. We hope this language will position our government to push back against provincial restrictions on harvesting rights, whether they be provincial boundaries, ancestral requirements, or licensing or other regulations.
Oh, it's my turn, okay. So what we heard for our government should be ambitious, focused, and efficient in its operations. Oh, Brian's telling me I'm not talking close enough. He wants me to yell at you. Did you hear me on that one? Yeah? While many of our citizens made recommendations to expand the goals and the responsibilities of the Otipemisiwak Métis government, others made it clear that they want our new government to use its resources in an efficient, effective, and responsible manner. The Commission attempted to balance these competing priorities in Chapter 13 on the priorities, on the purposes, goals, and responsibilities of the Otipemisiwak government. So what we changed, we expanded the roles and responsibilities, we built collaborative relationships, and responsible and sustainable government. In response to the recommendations, the Commission added several new goals and responsibilities of the government and placed a renewed emphasis upon the responsible use of financial resources and the creation of a sustainable government structure and programming. To do this, we added the repatriation and protection of cultural artifacts to Section 13.2b, and we created 13.2c, which instructs the government to protect and promote the traditional and cultural knowledge of our people in Section 13.2c. We also added the provision of public safety and justice to Section 13.2j to support the creation of safety and justice programs and policies that are specifically tailored to meet the needs of our citizens. We added 13.2p, which charges our new government with maintaining productive relationships with all levels of Canadian government in pursuit of reconciliation through collaborative partnerships, while Section 13.21 instructs our government to provide mechanisms for dispute resolutions that promote reconciliation and the restoration of good relations. It is our hope that these measures will support our new government in building both strong and equitable relationships with other governments. Finally, the Commission added Section 13.2h, which directs the government to operate in a transparent and fiscally responsible manner. Fiscal responsibility and transparency were clear priorities for our citizens in our recent round of engagements. To complement this change, the Commission altered the language in 13.2g from self-sustaining to self-determining. This change was made so that this clause could not be interpreted as relieving Canada of its constitutional responsibilities to the Métis. Travis.
Thank you. Next, I'll talk about what we heard, number 5. Our government should be smaller in size. That's smaller relative to what we were proposing. and have clear lines of authority and accountability. So citizens, we heard clearly, they were expressing concerns about the size of the newly proposed government and requested the Constitution simplify the structure of the government and create clearer jurisdictional boundaries and lines of authority between the levels of government to reduce conflict and power struggles. In particular, our citizens questioned why the previous draft of the government separated the executive and legislative functions into two overlapping branches and requested greater clarity on the division of responsibilities between the Citizens' Council and the district councils. So, I'd like to share a bit about what we changed to try to reflect that. So in response to these recommendations, the Commission made several key changes to the structure of the government in Part 3 of the Constitution, including the following: combining what was formerly the People's Council and the Legislative Assembly into one body, the Citizens' Council, which is Chapter 16. This decision was made to streamline the operations of our government and reduce the overlap and potential for power struggles, keep the size of the government within reasonable limits. In addition to consolidating these two branches of the government into one, the Commission took the position of the chair and made it an independent officer of the government and a non-voting member of the Citizens' Council, which is now in Chapter 22. This was done so that no district would lose its vote on the Citizens' Council, as the previous draft had the chair as an elected representative of a district. The Constitution also creates clear separation between the Citizens' Council and the District Council. In the previous draft, what was now the Citizens' Representative was also the head of a District Council, and several participants remarked that this arrangement could potentially blur accountability and result in less effective government if one person is doing multiple jobs. So to address this issue, the Citizens' Representative no longer sits on the District Council, and the citizens of each district will be able to elect a district captain to lead their district council. It's our hope that having an elected and accountable leader of the district councils will result in more effective and accountable government. Some of you that have been following since the very first draft might recognize that word captain coming back in. It was one of the things we had proposed initially, and in the second draft it wasn't there. And we're bringing it back, and we're bringing back that word in particular because of the historical significance of the captain of the hunt for us. Finally, the Commission took measures to create clearer roles and responsibility for the Citizens' Council and the District Councils in sections 15.7 and 16.20 to avoid overlapping jurisdiction and power struggles. There were, however, some areas where overlapping jurisdiction is inevitable, such as lands and programming. For lands, the Constitution now empowers both the Citizens' Council under section 16.20A and the District Councils under 15.7E to repatriate, own, and manage lands. The difference is that while the Citizens' Council will own the land to benefit all citizens of the Metis Nation within Alberta, the District Councils will own land to benefit the residents of their district. For programs, the Commission decided to empower both the Citizens' Council, 16.20D, and District Councils, in 15.7F, to create institutions to oversee program and service delivery. The Commission decided that the Constitution should determine which level of government should provide which programs and services, so as not to handcuff future governments from providing programs and services needed by citizens, regardless of where they live. So with that, I'll hand over to, actually, I'm not sure. Lisa.
That's me.
I did. I stopped at that.
So the sixth theme that we're going to talk about and what we heard is that our government must be balanced and have representation for the different parts and groups that make up our citizenry. So we did receive considerable input into the question of how the different groups within the Métis Nation within Alberta would be represented in the new government, including women, excuse me, sorry, youth, elders, and knowledge keepers, as well as urban and rural residents. While some participants wanted to see advisory councils strengthened to ensure more equitable representation for underrepresented groups, others felt that advisory groups were inadequate as representation, and that key groups needed to have direct representation on the elected citizens' council. We heard very strongly also from both rural and urban residents that the new constitution must strike a balance between providing urban citizens with more equitable representation, as well as at the same time protecting the interests of our rural citizens. So in considering the feedback that we received on that topic, we attempted to strengthen the representation of historically underrepresented groups, as well as balancing the interests of urban and rural voters. Section 16.2C and D within the Constitution proposed the creation of a women's representative, an elected women's representative, as well as an elected youth representative who will sit on the Citizens' Council. In keeping with Metis tradition and customs, both of these representatives will be selected by all citizens, so all citizens will vote on those 2 seats. As we discussed this morning, and we heard some feedback from our youth, the draft as proposed reads that the youth representative must be 25 years of age or younger at the time of their election, and that these 2 new positions were made in response to calls from our women's and youth organizations to have not just a voice at the table, but having a voting right at the table. Citizens also called for an important role, and we recognize the important role of our elders and knowledge keepers, and recognizing the need to have the elders and knowledge keepers have a meaningful input into the government. So in response, section 16.12 requires that the Citizens' Council will select a council of elders or knowledge keepers to provide advice and support to the Citizens' Council. Finally, we attempted to strike a balance between the urban and rural voters in many ways. Excuse me. We attempted to limit, first of all, the number of rural districts by having those territories with larger populations having more districts. Second, the Commission divided the 2 large urban centres, the districts of Calgary and Edmonton, into 2 districts each, recognizing the populations and effectively doubling the representation for those 2 large urban populations. And finally, the existence of 3 province-wide elected members of the Citizens' Council, as I mentioned. So we have the president, we have the women's representative, and the youth representative. And these 3 votes will ensure the need to support also the urban citizens. We believe that this strikes a balance between providing urban citizens with enhanced representation, as well as protecting the interests of rural citizens and ensuring that urban areas do not simply control the government. And I'll move on to theme number 7.
So on theme number 7, what we heard, our government and elected officials should be accountable to our law and citizens. A consistent theme the Commission heard from citizens was the importance that our Constitution create a system of government that can hold elected officials accountable to the rule of law and to the citizens that elect them. This can be done through the judicial system as well as through arm's-length officers such as the Ombudsman and Code of Ethics and Conduct. Several participants in our citizens' engagement pointed out the need to strengthen these structures of accountability and ensure they are adequately protected from political interference and pressure to allow them to do their job and hold elected officials accountable. So what we changed in number 7, several participants commented that in the previous version of the Constitution, the judiciary, then called the justice sector, was not an equal order of government with the branches, and expressed concern that the justice sector would not have the independence and authority to hold other branches accountable to the rule of law and the Constitution. To address this concern, the Commission made the judiciary a formal and equal branch of the Otipimswag government, now called the Judicial Branch on Chapter 17. It is the Commission's hope that this change will create a system of checks and balances that will ensure that no branch becomes dominant and no elected official will be above the law. Participants similarly expressed concerns that the officers of the Ombudsman and the Auditor General were not sufficiently independent from the Citizens' Council to carry out their functions and hold elected officials accountable. While there's no risk in making such offices completely independent, while there is, I better read this right here, while there is a risk in making such offices completely independent, in the sense that they could end up both unelected and unaccountable, the Commission accepted the need to protect these offices from political interference. To address these concerns, the Section 22.2 and 23.2 of the Constitution makes the Ombudsman and the Auditor General arm's-length officials of the Otipemisiwak Métis government. Section 23.5, moreover, requires the existence of a law that protects the work of the Auditor General from political interference. Audrey's turn.
What we heard, number 8, constitutional amendments and modern-day treaties with Canada should have strong citizen engagement and support. The Commission received numerous suggestions and recommended formulas for constitutional amendments. What united all the different suggestions, however, was one common thread, that citizens should be more directly involved in any constitutional amendments. Similarly, several participants noted that any modern-day treaties or land claim agreements should have strong support from citizens, and particularly of the districts that make up our regional right-bearing communities. So what we changed? In response to the citizens' input, the Commission modified the formula to amend the Constitution found in Chapter 29. Any constitutional amendment now must be first presented to the citizens' gathering for review and input, then approved by 3/4 of the members of the Citizens' Council to ensure support from both rural and urban areas. And finally, any constitutional amendment must receive the support from a majority of voters in a referendum. In addition, Section 29.2 prohibits amendments to the Constitution in the first 5 years, with the exception of a constitutional amendment related to the Metis settlements. The reason is to avoid the temptation to alter the Constitution before our citizens have had time to see how the new government operates, while ensuring that we do not close the door to the inclusion of the Metis settlements into our new government should the opportunity arise within the first 5 years. To ensure that any modern-day treaty or land claim agreement has the support of the citizens and districts that make up our regional right-bearing communities, the Commission added Chapter 28, which requires that any modern-day treaty or land claim agreement must be presented to the citizens' gathering, approved by 3/4 of the Citizens' Council, and then ratified by 3/4 of district councils within 1 year. Karen?
What we heard, theme 9. We need to create a space for the Métis settlements and protect all Métis lands. One of the more challenging components of the Constitution has been the Métis settlements. On one hand, the Commission wants the Constitution to acknowledge the importance of the Métis settlements to Alberta Métis, to the Alberta Métis history, and to all Métis Nation within Alberta citizens, both on and off settlement. On the other hand, the Commission does not want to predetermine the potential place of and role for the Métis settlements in our new government in a way that could potentially stifle future negotiations with Métis settlements. The previous draft of the Constitution created the possibility that the Métis settlements could opt to become districts in the new Otipemisiwak Métis government with their own district councils. This proposal, however, generated much confusion, and settlement leadership declined to engage with the Commission regarding that proposal. So what we changed? We know that we needed a place for Métis settlements in our new government. Seeking constitutional protection for Métis settlement lands. In response, the Commission revised Chapter 19 on the Alberta Métis settlements to both acknowledge the centrality of Métis settlements to all Métis people in Alberta and leave the door open to the future inclusion of Métis settlements into the Otipemisiwak Métis government without predetermining the nature of that relationship. In particular, Section 19.4 now reads, one or more Métis settlements may seek to join the Otipemisiwak Métis government on terms to be negotiated with the Citizens' Council and ratified as an amendment to this Constitution. It is the Commission's sincere hope that a more open-ended and flexible invitation in the Constitution will encourage discussions and negotiations between Métis settlements and the Otipemisiwak Métis government in the future. Another question the Commission received on several occasions was how will the new Constitution protect Métis settlement lands from unilateral decisions made by the Government of Alberta? Given the centrality of Métis settlements and the Métis settlements lands to all Alberta Métis, the Commission added Section 20.2 sub D, which instructs the Otipemisiwak Métis government to secure protection of Métis settlement lands by the Constitution of Canada. It is our hope that future governments will be able to work with Métis settlements to obtain constitutional protection for Métis settlement lands, the inheritance of all Métis people in Alberta.
Okay, so the last piece I want to discuss with you is on non-constitutional matters. We received many thoughtful contributions that were not directly related to the Constitution. So over the course of 10 round tables, 19 community gatherings, 5 hearings, 28 written submissions, the Commission received many thoughtful and detailed comments, questions, and proposals related to matters other than the Constitution. That was particularly true regarding a transition plan that we will detail how our existing structures will transition into the new government and the enabling laws that must be in place before our new government can come into force, hold elections, and begin operations. So what we did was compile documents on transitional plan and compile documents on enabling laws. While the transition plan and the enabling laws are beyond the Commission's terms of reference and scope, the Commission wanted to honor all the time and knowledge put in by our citizens, as well as facilitate the work of those bodies that will be responsible for these components of our self-government process. To do this, the Commission has and will continue to compile all feedback received in relation to the transition plan and enabling laws into documents that will be submitted to the bodies responsible for handling those matters. The Commission hopes this will both ensure no citizens' feedback is unnecessarily wasted and that our efforts can support the bodies responsible for the transition plan and the enabling laws in their duties. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. And we have one more slide left, but before I do that, I would like to introduce the transition committee that was established by resolution from the last year's annual assembly. The committee is comprised of myself and Dan Cardinal, and maybe I can have the Commission people stand and just wait until we introduce everyone so you can see who the transition committee is. Dan Cardinal, VP. And it was 2 citizens selected by each of the 6 regional leadership. So Region 1, we have Bill Ludit and Sean McDonald. Region 2, we have Jerry Germain and Angela Field. I don't think they're here today. They were, or one of them was here yesterday for our meeting, but had to go back home. Region 3 is Ward Sutherland and Grant Britton. There they are. Region 4, Lauren Gladue and Lloyd Gwynn. And Region 5, Walter Andreef and Jamie Chalafu. And Region 6 is Pat Brothers and Camelia Ridsdale. Camelia is here somewhere. I know she, where is she? Okay. So that's the transition committee that is going to do the work following the commissioner's work finished in getting our commission approved and ratified. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here. So what comes next? Many of you have been wondering, what is the process? What does come next? As many of you know, on June 4th, an M&A Special Assembly convened in Grand Prairie approved a special resolution to postpone the 2022 M&A elections for 1 year to allow time for all the work to be completed so that we can hold elections in the fall of 2023 under our new government. The special resolution presents the Commission with a clear direction and timeline. The Constitution should be ratified as soon as possible so that all of the other pieces required for our new government come into force. The transition plan, the enabling laws, the fiscal financing agreement, and the order in council from Canada can be developed and finalized in time for elections in the fall of 2023. As you can see from this graph up there, the work of the Commission is nearly complete. We are asking our citizens to vote at this AGA to approve this Constitution and send it to a province-wide ratification vote, likely held this fall. If our AGA approves this Constitution, the Commission will begin an extended information campaign to support all M&A citizens to make an informed decision on the Constitution. At the end of this campaign, all eligible M&A citizens will be able to vote on whether to ratify the Constitution or not. If a majority of voters approve the Constitution, the work of the Commission will be complete. At that point, the remaining pieces outlined in the Meaty Government Recognition and Self-Government Agreement, I think it's changed its name now, will need to be negotiated, drafted, and approved by the bodies authorized to conduct this work, including the supporting agreements, such as the transition plan, the enabling laws, the new elections. Once all of these pieces are in place, we will arrive at the coming into force date, which is the day our new government will take legal force. And then, after decades of struggle, we, the Otipemisiwak, the people who rule themselves, will have created a Métis Constitution and a Métis government by us and for us. So that's what we have done to date, and now we, thank you. So thank you, that's what we have done to date, and now we leave it open for you to give us more feedback and see where we go. So we will open those mics for any feedback, discussion. Mic 3, go ahead.
Hi, I just want to say thank you so much for all of your guys' hard work. My name is Lindsay Tabin from Region 3. I'm the founder and president of Kishkay Mituk, the New Earth Network. We're a Métis-led nonprofit with Indigenous and non-Indigenous members, providing affordable, sustainable food options. We're building infrastructure and the foundation for an independent Western medical and alternative Indigenous healthcare system, as well as education and other programs. I'm concerned about the Commission rejecting medical autonomy. Western medicine, health, and science derived from colonization. Our people know how to heal ourselves and treat illness without these Western ways, and our people should have the choice in the matter, free from discrimination. My question is why medical autonomy, medical freedom can't be enforced. This morning it was said that despite our Métis Constitution, the provincial government and federal government laws prevail. Is that correct, from my understanding?
We said, oh, I think our legal person will answer.
Could we turn the mic on? Oh, there.
Yeah.
For those laws properly within the jurisdiction of the Métis government, the Métis government laws will prevail.
Okay. So can you explain then why medical autonomy can't be enforced in our Constitution?
Health is a provincial jurisdiction. So initially, the scope of the jurisdiction of the new government will include core self-government matters, citizenship, leadership selection, internal management. Health could be the subject of what the self-government agreement calls a supplementary self-government arrangement. So once that is negotiated, the new government properly has jurisdiction over health, then they would be able to pass prevailing laws in health, but we're not at that point yet.
Okay. So my other concern is Chapter 10, 10.1. If we look at what the Canadian government has done by disrespecting the Canadian Constitution already and utilizing this same section as an abuse of power, how can we ever guarantee Métis rights unless there is natural law or sovereign rights that can't be altered to be included as inherent rights for our people?
So there's two ways that a provincial or federal government can avoid the application of the charter. One way is what's called the Notwithstanding Clause, where a government just says, the charter doesn't apply to this law. I'm just going to pass this law anyway. There is nothing like that in this Constitution. This Constitution does not allow the new Atipimsuak Métis government to opt out of the Bill of Rights. The other thing in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, is Section 1, which provides that there can be justifiable limitations on rights. And that's a high bar to cross, and that's what this is doing. This is saying there might be exceptional circumstances where in a democratic Métis society, it's justified to limit a certain right to the minimal extent to achieve a valid objective. And that's a high bar to cross, and that's what this is echoing. So I think the real fear is giving governments the power to opt out, like we've seen happen in Quebec, like we've seen happen recently in Ontario, and that's not something that's happening here.
Thank you. I guess my concern is to be reasonable and justified, you know, in the wrong hands, we ultimately still wouldn't have any rights in that case. However, it kind of leads me to my next question. On page 7, chapter 6, letter N.
Can I just stop you 1 minute? I
Yeah.
think one of the commissioners, Brian, you had your hand up. You want to speak to it?
Yeah, so the Constitution did not get into details. The Constitution is a big brush, it just brushes. So if you look at Chapter 6 on the Bill of Rights, under I, for example, it says here, the right to practice, transmit, and ensure the continuation and evolution of spiritual custom, practices, and traditions of the Métis Nation within Alberta without harassment, discrimination, and persecution. And L, it says the right to safety, health, well-being, and the ability of its citizens to live a good life. So what that should say to all of us, to you and all of us, is that how we decide to translate or interpret that into laws, into legislation, and then to practice is really up to us. It's up to us. It's up to our creativity. But each one of these are just touched on like health. They just said just like that. You can build a lot stronger case. The word medical autonomy definitely was not used, but that doesn't retract or take away from the fact that there's health in there. How you now want it to be translated, interpreted, and put into practice, I think would be up to you and up to the new government to then interpret.
Sure, and that's understandable, but again, if the Alberta provincial government prevails over that, we still don't have a leg to stand on, is my concern.
I didn't, so this is the challenge going to be for us. I'll leave it in the legal hands, but I'm going to say to you that when we create a government, that is going to be an issue between the two governments. I've always had the opinion that we run our own affairs and our own governance. The transfer of dollars, so Alberta gets transfers of finances to the province. So you heard Zach saying this morning, we're going to be in a similar situation of having funds, finances, fiscal responsibility transferred to our government. So I'm guessing part of that will be a health bundle, whatever that looks like. And so that becomes our piece.
Okay, good to know. Because just, you know, I appreciate referencing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, but we need to understand that this is simply just an instrument. It's not a legally binding contract in Canada. So again, I just want to get back to how are we ultimately protecting our rights and our people in all of this?
So you're right that the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People is not black letter law in Canada. I'm sure you've heard about the Undrup Act, the federal legislation that requires the government to create a plan to implement the declaration. In our discussions with Canada about the legislation to implement this self-government agreement, they view that as a measure to implement the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. So we're making that bridge by referencing it in the Constitution. And for those things for which we negotiate jurisdiction, rights will be protected. For those things that we can argue are a part of your Section 35 Aboriginal rights, those rights will be protected. And there is jurisprudence saying that the right to choose Indigenous traditional medicine is a Section 35 Aboriginal right. So if this comes up as an issue, the clause that Brian pointed to, which protects a right to safety, health, well-being, and the ability of its citizens to lead a good life, could be used to defend that right to choose traditional medicines, which has been recognized in one case in Ontario as an Aboriginal right.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Zach. Sound guys, can you hear? We don't seem to be able, somehow we don't seem to be able to hear when Zach is responding from here. Is there something going on there or what? Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, number 2, I think you were next. Go ahead.
Thank you, Audrey. Jeff Shalfo, Zone 5. Just a couple of questions on different spectrums of the, and probably one hypothetical one is, come this time next year, that in case we have, you know, some stumbling blocks along the way that this isn't ratified or isn't ready to be implemented. So next year comes around, what happens to the elections if this is not ratified or if there's some delays in that process?
Okay, I can probably answer that. Right now, what has happened is based on the special resolution, our bylaws have been changed to extend us 1 year and 1 year only till September 2023. So the election is set to happen then. Okay?
Thank you. The other question, again, just for clarification, though I don't have any solutions to it, but in your deliberations as a commission, was there any communication or any negotiations happening with our brothers and sisters in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, BC, and Ontario as to conformity or consistency in constitutions across the Métis homeland?
So I think I probably have to answer that as well. So in Ontario, they haven't really started on their consultations on their constitution at this point. So they have nothing in place. They have nothing at this point. In Saskatchewan, they had a constitution that was developed before, and they are going out having discussions with their citizens to make amendments to it. Other than just basically at a couple of Board of Governors meetings where we've specifically talked about certain things, we hadn't gone and had any consultations with them. No, we haven't.
Would the goal, would the goal be for the Métis Nation of Alberta and across the MNC to have a consistent constitution so that one would one provincial legislative government would relate directly to a national government?
At this point in time, that's not what's happening. I know you've been very involved in the politics for many, many years, and certainly for many years when I sat at the national table, the idea was for no province to basically move forward, but look at moving forward in a national sense, and everybody needed to be together to go forward. In lots of areas, that has not been able to even, because everybody is at such a different pace. And then Saskatchewan went ahead and did a Meaty Act for themselves within the Saskatchewan government. So what we have been doing the last while is having joint discussions. And when we started it, it was BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario. Of course, as you all know, Ontario chose to pull out of that process and not be with us. So it ended up, and BC hasn't got their self-government agreement signed off yet. They're still working on it. So it ended up the three of us. So we have been working jointly, but independently as well. And what the government Canada has recognized at this point is that there is 5 Métis governments within the Métis National Council as the national organization. And that's the way it's seen. That's our national coordinating organization, but the governments are the 5 provinces. So we are going forward with ours, and in lots of ways I see that as very beneficial because, as I'm sure you knew when you were on council many years ago, and the Métis Nation within Alberta was a lead in a lot of those things. And it's not fair that we should have to sit around and wait because we are very proactive in a lot of the things that we're doing. And that's been, from when I look at history, that's been all along the way. And so Government of Canada has recognized that and sees it as 5 Métis governments, with the Métis National Council being the coordinating body at the national level. That's where we're at right now. Now, Manitoba Métis Federation has pulled out, and we're not quite sure where they're going or what they're doing, but that's being worked on. I mean, lots of discussion going on there too, but they've totally pulled out of Métis National Council. So at this point in time, there's no more discussion about a national, a constitution that would be a national constitution. Not at this point anyway. Okay?
Did you want to just reference this part of our programs and services?
Okay, just
13.2.
Karen's just pointing out to me in 13.2 N, the Otipemisiwak Métis government's goals and responsibilities are to collaborate with other Métis governments to coordinate delivery of programs and services to citizens. Okay? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, number 1.
Tanche, my name's Adam Browning. I'm the president for the Lethbridge and Area Local. I want to thank the Assembly and the Constitution Committee for allowing me to make some points. You know, we all want a constitution. This is something that's been fought for over 100 years. We just want the right constitution. I have members of my community who have a junior high level understanding, and they're asking me, how is this representative of us? So I have a bunch of points, but for the sake of the assembly, I'll bring up the top 3. How is this representative of us when there's no formula for what an election looks like? Our president has said that they have a clear mandate established by a special resolution in Grand Prairie. That was a vote, 3 votes, with a margin of 1 of approximately 200 people out of 53,000. So now I'm seeing no details about elections in here. How is that going to be representative of us? I'll save my questions about the other points and allow the commission to answer that, and then my colleagues and members of my nation being able to ask questions. Thank you.
That assembly wasn't the commission.
So who's wanting to answer?
Yeah, I think we have talked, we're all pointing, who wants to talk about that? Because we have talked about that. So I want to, just on the elections point, absolutely there needs to be, how it's built into the Constitution is a recognition that there needs to be an election law. There needs to be a law around that. And that, I suppose, would be consistent with other governments that establish elections rules by elections laws. And so you're absolutely correct. The detail is not within the Constitution itself, but the obligation to maintain such laws at all times is in the Constitution. And in terms of that lawmaking, and you'll see that dispersed throughout the entire Constitution at many points, a law must be established for this, for that, at many points. And so that is an absolute key point that must be legislated. That is not the role of this commission to write those laws, but certainly that's been captured. I know Brian, in one of his slides, he talks about capturing important matters that are not built within the Constitution, but absolute an important task list, if I can say that. And the election law absolutely is one of them that must be established, and it must be established at all times. That is built into the Constitution.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Anybody else want to speak to it? No? Okay.
Can you speak to that motion in Grand Prairie? It's not, it wasn't the commission's.
Are you okay?
I can make a comment.
Go ahead, whatever.
So the gentleman, Adam made a comment about the Grand Prairie resolution. I just wanted to tell you that that's not the commission's role, nor was it their place to discuss that resolution. That was a provincial council debate and discussion. They choose to deal with that. So thanks for asking us, but we really don't have any authority around that.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Number 3.
Number 2's been standing longer. Let him
Number
go
3?
first.
Oh, number 2? Go ahead, go ahead.
Yes, thank the commission for holding this session. And just a question, my name is William Bellum, first of all, Region 6, Fairview Local. Just for clarification, every registered member of the M&A will get a ballot for ratification and the final draft of the Constitution. That's my question.
Yes. Does anybody else want to? Yes, so the way we will bring it to the assembly tomorrow. Even if it is passed there, every single member will have an opportunity to vote if they so choose. So what we have, and I think they're out in the hallway there, we have a group that is putting communications together for us, where if people want to vote by mail, by ballot, by some other social media stuff, however that is, I don't know, because I don't know all the ways. Votes take place in many different ways right now, and they're establishing that. And what we're trying to do with that is to say, We have over 54,000 citizens that are registered. And every person that wants to should be able to find a way that they can vote on this constitution. So yes, that's exactly what we're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, number 3.
Melanie Omanhio, Region 4. So I do really appreciate the fact that there has been a lot of work. There's been a lot of consultation and engagement around this constitution. But first off, I want to tell you that once it's all done, there should be a constitution that is not only just in English, but translated into both Cree and Michif to respect the languages that Métis Nation of Alberta is a part of. I also want to tell you that district boundaries, drawing lines on a map is old game. We need to have GPS coordinates for all of those lines. We can no longer be sitting here and going, well, this is really this district's or that district's jurisdiction. There needs to be GPS coordinates that clearly outline where the districts are. I also want to know if you guys have done any work, and I'm going to stop for a second so you can answer. I want to know what the Métis population of all those districts that you guys have created is, because I have a deep suspicion that some of them would be hard-pressed to find many Métis people.
Melanie, I'm not, maybe other people want to answer as well, but we have, with our registry, the way it is, we have actually pulled out areas to say what is the population there, because there was much discussion around balancing representation. And we know very well that it's very difficult to balance something like Edmonton with the population they have, and a small community like, maybe I'll use Fort Chip. But that doesn't mean to say you don't look at other things that have to look at that balance, right? And that's what we tried to do. So yes, we did clearly ask for numbers on different areas, and we did try to use clearly, not that we GPS'd every district, but we did try to use boundaries like roadways, like waterways, like all of those kinds of things to try to actually be able to do that GPS.
Natural means and bounds.
Okay, I want to say that I do know that there needs to be more than a formula of population, but nobody's identified to us, the citizens, what that formula was. So it would be important for us to understand what your thoughts were, and that it's more than just saying, I'm from Fort Chip, I want my own district. So that's what I'm asking.
Okay, Travis, did you have those? Oh, that was in our first.
That was for the Legislative Assembly, yeah.
Oh, when we have, yeah.
Thank you, Melanie. Is this on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the previous draft, we were considering a formula because we were thinking around the number of legislative assembly people would be somewhat, very lightly sort of reflected by the population. With this draft, because we've merged the Legislative Assembly and what was the People's Council into the new Citizens Council, we don't really, it's one representative per district. But you're right, like there's a great variation in Métis population. We tried to look at Métis population from a few different perspectives, census information, what registry numbers are telling us, things like that. But there's a number of considerations that we tried to take into account when suggesting district boundaries, and mostly what are people telling us, because I live in Edmonton, I don't know, right? So a lot of that thought went into those, but they're not perfect. They're not going to be perfect. And they're also not part of the Constitution itself either. The Constitution says there must be a law about it. They must be, they do have to be described by natural, Casey uses the term regularly, natural means and bounds, or some kind of formal GPS descriptions of them. But to change them doesn't require a constitutional amendment. They can be changed by a law.
Okay, thank you. The second thing that I want to bring up here is the citizenships gathering.
Mel, I want to deal
Okay,
with this too.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Brian, I didn't see your hand.
So there was a bunch of other values we used when we were deciding that population. It was one of the pieces, but the obvious one is distance, geography, the size of a place, the distance to fly into Fort Chip, for example. So the other piece was traditional territory and traditional use of how many people use this land. I'll give you an example. We're out in Edson. We had it figured out where the line was going to be, and they quickly told us we didn't know what we were talking about, that we better run the line down some, I can't remember the name of that road, but we said, oh, well, you know what? We don't have a clue what line we're talking about, but we'll get that straightened out. So what we were really pushing is thinking, these are lines, guys and girls, so you guys tell us what the actual line is. And so much to Travis's point was that they're not in a constitution, meaning that there's room for them to be shifted and moved. And really like your idea of the GPS. We asked Steve to do that. He was going to do that. It got so squiggly. We said, maybe we don't want to do that right now, Theo, because it was just, down the line, and it was not the line, actually, is what I'm trying to say. So those are very serious pieces, and definitely we should push for that as well. Yeah.
I might as well throw in my 2 cents here too, Mel.
All right.
So I've certainly raised that a number of times, but because we were still like in the draft stage, it's probably very costly to do that. I do want to say though, once the process gets started, if it's adopted and we start moving toward ratification, certainly because our territories are part of our constitution, for sure that needs to be the first exercise, is to GPS our territorial boundaries. So it becomes part of the information. It likely won't be part of the Constitution because it's already written, but we need to have that information. I'm on the same page as you with respect to just drawing lines, because when you use a marker and when you're on the ground, that marker line might be 15-kilometer difference. So I'm there with you in that regard. With respect to the districts, I think that exercise needs to as well be done with respect to the district boundaries. But like my colleagues have said, for the purposes of this draft discussion, we used as much as we could natural means and bounds, rivers, roads, and all that other stuff. But I'm with you. That has to be done because it has caused situations in the past with our big black marker on our bylaws and stuff like that, those maps. So I'm there with you. Thanks for raising that.
So I also want to put this in. I'm not picking on Fort Chip because as far as I'm concerned, it's one of the oldest historical Meaty communities in this country, in this province, and we need to make sure they're represented there. So I know that was an example being used, but actually on your district map, it's not Fort Chip that's my concern, but there are 1 or 2 districts that are. But I want to talk about now your citizenship gathering, which is kind of like what the assembly has been. And in there, you define that who will be reporting is the president. And at nowhere in your constitution do you have district representatives or secretaries, as you guys are defining them, which I'm assuming are ministries. You do not have them reporting and being accountable to the Métis Nation citizens. And so we need to have accountability not just by a president, but by every elected official of the Métis Nation.
You're absolutely right.
So,
So, as you'll see on 14.4, there needs to be a law that will discuss the operations of the citizens gathering. So, for those people that may be in the crowd, and certainly for Zach, because we've heard some of those points, and when Brian mentioned that when these points are raised, we are documenting those and we will pass it on to those bodies. The point that you raised today will certainly be passed on to the body that will be drafting the laws with respect to particularly the operations of the citizens gathering, because I truly hear you. And like we've said, we've had to, we couldn't put everything in there, but when we had some of those discussions or when those points were raised, we certainly know that these points were, say, laws of the operation, that's where those particular details will need to be addressed, and people will know and understand through the dialogue and consultation when those laws piece happens that those items need to be, because as many times as that we've written in there with respect to accountability, transparency, and accountable to our citizens, those are the exact kind of points that we had discussion on. So we didn't miss it. We just know that it will be covered in that law, or we hope it will be, because that's not our responsibility after that.
Okay, thanks, Karen. We still have a couple more. Lisa, you wanted to speak to that?
Yeah, no, for sure. No, thanks. I just wanted to point out, just to make sure everybody understands what, very good question, and I just wanted to clarify. So in Chapter 14, at the citizens gathering, it does reflect that the president will provide a report, but it also says that the Citizens Council and institutions shall provide annual reports to the citizens. And then if you look at the Citizens Council itself, it is made up of one representative per district, plus that elected women's representative, the elected youth representative, and then the president. So the intent is there to have not just the president report, but also the Citizens Council provide those annual reports at the citizens gathering.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Travis, did you have something?
Yeah, just one more small point. Another provision that might speak to what you're interested in, Melanie, is 15.7A directs regarding the district councils, the operation of the district council, including the holding of meetings, elections, financial management, accountability, and reporting to the citizens in the district. So it wasn't included in the gathering, but it was included as a accountability and a responsibility of the council itself.
okay, I appreciate that, and I want to let you know this, that the reason why it's a point of contention is because we know that there are many people that came at Grand Prairie, as I heard, and there are people that are here that believe that their representatives are not accountable to them. And there's no process of recall within this. If you have a bad elected official who doesn't do their job, I don't know if your intention is to have that within your election process, but the right of recall, I know, was something that was important to Metis citizens. And I also want to bring this up. So I heard you guys today, I know I still got a lot of work to do, because when you say that women need to be elected by everybody because they're going to have a say on all matters being a part of this council. Well, guess what? Then does that mean if I live in Region 22, I get to help elect the guy that is in Region 11 because he gets to have a say on everything on the council? Women need to be elected by women. Youth need to be elected by youth, and they need to be accountable to women, and they need to be accountable to youth. The last thing that I'm going to bring up right now is that I am a part of Region 4, and at no point were two contractors of the Meaty Nation of Alberta put on a transitional committee by Region 4's president or
Sorry, you're cutting out there. What's happening with the,
so we
go ahead. Yeah.
they appointed by us. Whoever appointed Lauren Gladue and Lloyd Gwynn to the, yell loud enough, to the,
No, just hold it, Mel, that's unfair.
just
We need
wait,
to
what's happening?
get that mic, get a different mic there. Just hold on, Mel. Can someone get,
What's happening with the mic there? Number 3.
then they lose theirs.
Oh, he's bringing you another one. There you go.
thank you, Kendrick.
Yeah, no problem.
So they were not appointed by Region 4 or the Region 4 leadership. And I know there's challenges between the provincial leadership and Region 4's leadership. And the other Region 4 leadership vice president hasn't existed in our circle in a very long time. So I have nothing against Lloyd Gwynn or Lauren Gladue, but it's very unfair to say that they were appointed by Region 4.
So Melanie, I do need to respond to you on that. I want to make it very clear. Provincial never appointed anybody. Myself or Dan never appointed anyone. It was appointed. And that's what is part of the challenge that we have. And yes, you're right when people said we heard lots about that at the Special Assembly. We did. Because regional leadership are not working together in most cases. But those two people were appointed by regional leadership. And I have to just take whatever comes to me. And that's where it's at. Sorry. Wasn't me. Okay, we got number 1.
Good afternoon. Gary Gardner for Region 4. We are Region, right? My discussion is on item Chapter 16, composition of the Citizens Council. And I just want to say that the elders have always been an important part of our Métis society and believe they should be an integral part of a new government. They should work along with the youth and be a steadying influence. We've mentioned in past meetings, we talked about elders quite a bit, and I'm quite surprised that we don't have an elder or as a senator or an elder on the composition of the Citizens Council. And so I would like to ask why, as an integral part of our society, elders are left off of that.
Thank you, Gary. If you look under 16.12, the Citizens Council shall appoint a council made up of elders or knowledge keepers from among the citizens to provide their advice and support. So we have included them there as a specific council because we did hear from citizens in the engagement that at the very least the Elders and Knowledge Keepers Council should be identified in there. With respect to the composition section that you're referencing, we've also heard and have heard from some of the historical operations that many elders do not want to be put in a position of election.
Right.
So the composition piece where we elect the individuals, we chose not to put our elders in such a position of elders running against each other for an elder position. We chose to put them and identify them by a council in 16.12.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with you 100% that I also feel what many of them say. I don't think they should be elected either, as long as we have one. But what kind of a power do they have? Like, we have an ombudsman, but maybe we can save the ombudsman a lot of work if we have some power to do things before things get bad and has to go to the ombudsman. So what kind of power in 1612 will these elders have?
Again, that's established. I think, again, what the commission left there was it would be established by a law as advisory committees, whether that's the elders or whatever it is, whatever is decided to have, it could be established by a law with clear criteria. I think that's what you're asking, Gary.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Number one, go ahead. I know you moved over from somewhere else, so go ahead. They took your mic away, I think. Go ahead.
So maybe I should.
Oh, go ahead. Just 1 second. Go ahead, Brian.
So I thought on the elders, Gary, when we talked about it, when we talked about electing elders, and we've had elders councils before, and they were put in positions of trying to resolve disputes between politicians. And if I recall, it was a very unsettling, unnerving for some of the elders. I seen them cry. So I'm telling you that story because I seen that. So my own comment is, yes, we need the elders involved. They're very cultural. We need them to pray with us, to guide us, to teach us, to be our teachers, to be our historical teachers. So there's a big role, an important role for the elders, and we really need to clarify that in our laws. Their power won't be a political power. Their powers themselves. They're our elders. I just see it that way, and we love them, and we want that to be put in the right place.
Is that good enough?
Thanks.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, over to number one. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll need a minute here.
You need a minute? Okay, we'll just go to number two, and then you get organized there, and we'll come back to you. Oh, number three first. Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Oh, it's four now. It's four now. Okay, sorry.
I'm Bob Phillips, and a senior in Region 3. And I just want to do a quick plug for health and wellness. I just want to make everybody aware here that out at the tents in the back west side, there is the man van, and that is very handy for men who are concerned with any type of prostate cancer concerns. And also Wellspring, Calgary is in the tents as well. And they handle all kinds of cancer programs for individuals and their support spouses regarding diagnosed cancer. So I would like to encourage the men here, because I'm an advocate of that, and I've been involved in it myself for the last 3 years. If you have any questions, just go over to the man van, and they'll help you out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Bob. Thank you. Okay, are you organized now? Can we go back to you on one?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, my name's Gary Burke. I was a former leader of the Meaty from 1996 to 1999. And I done a draft response, and it's quite long, but I wanted to make it simple and directly to the point for the people so that they understood where they stood in the Métis Nation of Alberta. And this was done since the last draft at Smoky Lake last year. But there's another draft out, but I'll read it to you. My response to the Métis Nation government draft is based on the panel's presentation to the Meaty communities across the province of Alberta. Personally, I support the concept of the draft moving forward. What mostly got my attention for the draft support was where the OT-Pemesamic panel states a modern-day government will be developed. You all heard it. My draft response was submitted to the OT-Pemesamic panel and provincial president and vice in January, February, and March, respecting presentation protocols. And that's all of this. This was in the spring. One intention of my response was to clarify and to put into perspective the OT-Pemesamic draft for the benefit of the Métis Nation members, residents, and citizens. So, some response comments of my interest in my draft response that follow: the organizational flowcharts that will govern us provincially and regionally, 2 maps, one for the betterment of the region, representation for Métis people, and a historical traditional map that will guide our future land claims and harvesting rights. Community support in terms of business, development, environment, and multiple community bonding and sharing. And the ultimate importance of developing our own Senate to complement Canada's federal Senate that stands with the Métis people of Canada and the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous People. So I just want to go to my maps before I continue here with the flow chart. So the map that I proposed is the same map that I proposed in 1997 and 98 when I was a leader. But President Audrey Puttra was on that panel, and so was Brian Fayant. So this is what we came up with, and I live by it today. Okay, Region 1 is still Lac-La-Biche. We gave Fort McMurray their own region. We gave Peace River their own region. Grand Prairie stays the same. Slave Lake stays the same. And Lac-La-Biche now is half of the province of the Northeast. Yeah, thanks. So, Region 4 stays the same. Region 2 stays the same, but Lloydminster has their own autonomy, and Edmonton stays the same. Whitecourt to the west of Edmonton, Hinton, Drayton Valley have their own autonomy now. Okay, Red Deer and Rocky Mountain House have their own autonomy. They have their own leadership because Red Deer is the hub for all that area, including Rocky Mountain House. Calgary stays the same, and Medicine Hat and Lethbridge will have their own autonomy, and I understand the hub should be in Medicine Hat. So on the historical map that everybody has in their draft, the territories are divided into regional districts and 22, but I've got it down to 12 that I just presented. So Peace River territory will have Peace River and Grand Prairie. Slave Lake, of course, will have the Slave Lake territory. Lower Athabasca will be Fort McMurray and Lac-La-Biche. And North Saskatchewan River, of course, we'll have Edmonton, Lloydminster to the east, and Swan Hills, Whitecourt, Drayton Valley to the east. So Red Deer, Rocky Mountain House, Calgary, and Lethbridge Medicine Hat will be in the Battle River territory. I'll just follow it up with one of these here. Is in the very end of the historical dates in the making of the Meaty people of Alberta. In 1921, the timeline was the famous Big Five, and I mentioned their names because one of them had a brother in Laklabish, and his name was Jim Brady. So we got to mention these people by name. We just can't acknowledge them on the Big Five. We've got to tell these guys, we got to tell the people, Jim Brady, Malcolm Norris, Joe Dion, Peter Tompkins, and Felix Dion. These were the guys that helped us who we are today. And then at the very bottom in 2007, September 13th, United Nations Declaration, Rights of Indigenous People. I wanted that included, and I did. And the other one was in 2016. So I state, many thanks to the late Harry Daniels for taking our equal rights and Métis people to the Supreme Court of Canada for a historical Supreme Court 9-0 win. That solidified our place as Métis people in Canada law. So
Maybe there's two.
I was proud to meet Harry Daniels and Laklabish in 1970 when I was 17 years old. And you could tell he had the good Métis round black court, and he was in buckskin. So you know that this guy was going to do things for us, and he did.
He's just got a book there.
Okay, after my cover sheet that I just identified, I stated 2 organizational charts. Okay? So that was a big question when I was in Edmonton at one of the community panel meetings, was that people wanted us, they wanted to know how we were provincially organized. So I done the graph. So the provincial president, deputy minister, regional district ministerial cabinet with a regional district president house. So 6 will sit in each, and an appointed senate, which is crucial to us. A Métis Senate that implements laws with the regional presidency and regional president council and the people. So you have, okay, so on the with regional district, with the appointed advisory council, there's lots of talk about it today, and the appointed secretaries. Yeah. These positions will be appointed by a committee from the provincial level to work.
I think you're moving away from the mic. You're
Okay,
not
I'm
coming
sorry.
through very good.
Yeah, so the advisory councils and the appointed secretaries will have their duties when I read the following here on the Métis government organizational chart. This organizational chart is the Provincial Legislative Council of the Métis Nation of Alberta. There are 12 regional district presidents, Only regional district presidents will be elected from each region. There can be no political interference under them. Everybody else has to be appointed or hired. All regional district presidents will be assigned their portfolios by the provincial president. There is no election delegate position from each region. Now, that position, unfortunately, is going to be appointed by the president, and the secretaries are going to have more power than the regional district presidents. So the delegate position will be replaced by an appointed Senate, Senate of Canada, Standing Committee on Aboriginal People attached. And it is so important to develop our own Senate because developing our strong working relationship with the Canada Senate on a nation-to-nation basis. Okay, in the end, Canada Senate will have final approval on our OT-Pemesawik government constitution adoption. So with that standing committee in the Senate, that's Aboriginal, it's best for us to have that relationship. Everybody said nation to nation, government to government. That's who they are and that's what we can be. Okay. Our Métis Senate will also have final approval on Métis Nation laws passed at the Annual General Assembly, or when laws are passed and required at the provincial level only, which will be in the best interest of the Métis Nation. The intent and the meaning of the recommendations from the Métis members will be retained. So the law will always be retained, but it might be reworded, but the same meaning stays. The chair in the draft will be limited presiding over the Annual General Assembly by resolution or by provincial committee appointment. At the Annual General Assembly, the chair must clarify and state for all recommendations, whether it is law, act, policy, or administration order. We as Métis members are comfortable with the term Annual General Assembly. We've been identifying with this since 1961. We as Métis members have always participated in the business side of the Annual General Assembly. With a minimum of one per region, all appointments must meet the provincial president and regional district presidents will appoint the Senate. Advisory councils and secretaries, the provincial and regional council will do that. They have the authority and the power. With a minimum of one per region, all appointments must meet all the qualifications of their respected position. The Advisory Council will be responsible for all federal matters and report to the Provincial Council. The appointment of the secretaries will be responsible for Alberta provincial government and municipal matters. The secretaries will also report to the Métis Provincial Council. The financial report should be made available before the annual assemblies for early review, as well as the Annual General Assembly report. Because we got bogged down with so much stuff every time that we can't come prepared. All Métis citizens will participate in the Annual General Assembly, festivities, and eligible for all programs and services. The Métis members only will participate in the lawmaking legislative process. If we are similar to Parliament in some aspects of our Otim-Pemesawik government, it's only positive and favorable. We as Métis people are contemporary. and mainstream in every aspect of the socio-economic world of the day. It is most important to create a political structure, and here is the key. If we don't create a political structure that meets the youth of tomorrow leadership, we're in trouble. We have to do it. And we can't surround them with all political, we can't set them up for political interference when they're elected. They got to be appointed and hired. So with the ombudsman, justice sector, and the registrar's office, that really needs clarification, because there can be no overlapping, and each of them have their own autonomy. Yeah. So I got 3 pages here, and I passed out 150 today. If anybody can go online and read about Canada, the Senate, or if you have it today, there are 3 pages on it. I want to go through them so I can get this done.
Hello? So, Gary, are you almost finished? We're getting lines up at the other mics, so are you almost done?
Yeah. Okay, now the second flow chart of how we're going to be organized is this. We have a regional district president. He's the authority, the voice, and the power. Okay, under him, in the office, he has a chief executive officer, staff, chairs and committees who were former locals in the communities. They are now the chairs and committees, registered members, and Meaty residents and citizens. So that staff, that regional president for his members has the elders, the knowledge holders, the programs and services, and the affiliates. And he also has a consultation coordinator, community resource officer, community liaison employee, and a youth coordinator who should be appointed by a committee if he's the best candidate for that position. I don't believe that anybody under that regional district president should be elected, should be appointed. Yeah. So we're getting close here to finishing. The regional district president will be the only elected official of the district region. Regional presidents will be able to voice the authority of their region without political interference. President titles of the provincial president and the regional district presidents can never be diminished. Métis citizens, government, industry, general public will identify with the position. MLAs and MPs are the voice authority of their respected constituencies and ridings without political interference. They're the voice and they're the authority. Now with 12 regional districts, as opposed to 6, I increased it 100%. Métis members and residents will have better accessibility to regional district offices. The regional district president will develop a strong working relationship with the community-based chairs and committees who replaced the locals. No more political interference. They'll work a lot better. So now on a non-political basis, the regional president and chairs and committees will meet the needs, issues facing their respected communities. Chairs and committees may work on specific issues with other communities. The chairs will regularly meet and will receive an honorarium. The working relationship between the regional district president and chairs of the communities will achieve the success the Metis leadership can deliver to the people. But he's got the staff behind him to do that. Okay? We're devoted Metis, I know there's locals here, where devoted Métis community members will make that transition to chair and committee format with ease. With the regional district president in office and field staff, support goals of the communities will be met. Métis elders and knowledge holders will always be a valuable asset for Métis leadership, members, and residents. All chairs and committees will be capable of, here's a key. All chairs and committees will be capable of securing contracts, government funding, and grants based on the following. And here's how they're set up. If they're not already set up, here's how you can get it set up. Develop a name or numbered company. Register the company under the Societies Acts of Alberta. Appoint or elect directors who will hold the shares in trust for the community citizens and members. Gain tax exemption where all profits are spent on your community people. File all government requirements annually to retain tax exemption status. When it goes back to the community members, you don't pay taxes as a company. So when it comes to the environment, Prime Minister Trudeau directly protected the Métis people. Canada's new important Assessment Act has jurisdiction over any provincial environmental impact assessment. Here's what Trudeau protects with us. Change to fish and birds and fish and birds migrating habitats. Environment, federal and land interprovincial impact. Impact on Indigenous people, including heritage, on use of lands and resources. That's our good medicine people. Okay? For traditional purposes or on an industrial structure sites or anything of significance resulting in change to the environment. Change the social, health, and economic conditions of Indigenous people. So we have the right to present our issues at all these assessments because we got the backing of the federal government.
So Gary, I'm going to ask again, are you almost finished? Because we do have to take a break, and
Yeah.
we have people lined up at the
I'll have this
mic.
done in 5 minutes. I'm at the end of it.
Come on.
Okay. The regional district map has 12 regions, of course. The map is the same map that 14 of the provincial leadership designed in 1997-98. Rather than bylaws, we also chose to go with policy and procedure. Not only did we depoliticize our regions and Lac-La-Biche meetings, but also gave the Métis membership and residents closer accessibility to leadership offices. So President Audrey Patra was appointing regional district presidents to their portfolios, and some of them have done tremendous things with industry. So when it comes to economic development in regards to private-owned companies, and there's 500-600 Métis companies in Alberta. They can be, they can be Métis companies or non-based, or they can secure joint venture contracts. There's no jurisdictional restrictions where they can decide to do business in this country. At the Métis Nation, as the Métis Nation supports and promotes over 200 Métis companies and their Métis business directly today. These regional district areas are where the Métis are most familiar with and identified with since 1961. The communities in the map share a common bond with one another, such as, and I do it every day in Lac-La-Biche, and it's done in all the regions. Family, relatives, and friends living in close contact, culture, values, education, housing, health, seniors, industry, commerce, and employment, familiar with area, regional district offices, and community celebrations, recreation. That's what we all share, those 12 regional districts share with one another. So we just finished this at Meaty Crossing.
Point of order, point of order. Is there a question or a point that the rest of us can follow along with here? Seems like we've really gone off on a tangent here and there's other speakers.
We do have a lot of speakers lined up at the mic, but you know, this is a workshop and it is an opportunity for people to speak, so I wasn't about to cut someone off, but Gary, if you can finish your presentation, we have 2, 4, 6,
Yeah.
6 other people lined up, so, and I know we have to take a break. People are leaving because they need to take a break.
This will get done in a minute. This is the last, this is it. So creating our own annual Métis Festival gathering, showcasing our traditional Métis entertainment skills in competition in jigging, fiddling, square dancing, and singing. With elders, youth, and families in attendance, sharing our traditional foods, Michif Cree, and friendships. It's what unites us as a people. Métis Crossing would be the first annual Métis Festival gathering. This is where federal funds are available for all Canadians for the purposes of these festivals. So it looks like it was done because I sure enjoyed, and everybody else here enjoyed that Métis Festival at Métis Crossing. It was unbelievable. Thank you. I know it was long, but thank you. I had to get it done.
Okay, thank you. I know we have a bunch of people lined up with the mic, so I'm going to ask you, do you want to all speak first, or do we want to take your names so that you won't lose your place in line? But I think we do need to have a break. People are waiting to go. So can we just get your name, and as soon as we come back after the break, we'll have you come up first.
Cindy.
Cindy?
Yes.
Okay. Over to here, you were next.
Rhonda.
Rhonda, okay. And
Brian Hamlin was there.
Brian, okay. And
Melanie?
Melanie, you were next.
Me too.
Jude, okay.
Thanks.
Who else do we have there? Go ahead.
Jenna.
Jenna. I think that's everybody. So you know what? Let's take a 15-minute break and then let's come back and hear from all of those people. Thank you.